In the land of Brisenheim, where legends are forged in the flames of battle, the tales of its people echo through the ages.
The eastern sky bled crimson and gold. Dawn painted the vast open plains with hues of impending conflict. A chill wind whispered across the tall grass, rustling like the murmur of restless spirits. Soon the silence would be shattered. Soon the earth would drink deep of blood. The air hung heavy with anticipation. Dust devils danced on the horizon, harbingers of the approaching storm. This was no ordinary battleground. This was a stage set for legends to be forged and destinies decided. On one side, the royal army stood in disciplined ranks, a sea of polished steel and shimmering banners. Sunlight glinted off their armor, a dazzling spectacle of wealth and power. Their lines stretched as far as the eye could see, a testament to the might of the kingdom. Opposite them, a horde of raiders waited, a chaotic mass of furs and leather. Their eyes, hardened by years of hardship and battle, burned with a feral intensity. Their weapons, though mismatched and crude, were no less deadly. They were wolves circling a stag, hungry for victory. Tension crackled in the air, thick and suffocating. Both armies held their ground, a tableau frozen in time. The royal standard, a golden lion on a field of crimson, rippled softly in the breeze. It was a symbol of hope, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The raider chieftain, a mountain of a man with eyes like chips of flint, raised his hand. A hush fell over his men, their ragged breathing the only sound. This was the calm before the storm, the pregnant pause before the unleashing of unimaginable fury. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the earth, the raiders charged. They surged forward like a tidal wave, their weapons thirsting for blood. The ground trembled beneath their feet, the air filled with the deafening clang of steel meeting steel. The royal army met the onslaught with disciplined ferocity. Their lines held firm, a bulwark against the tide of savagery. Spears clashed against axes, swords sang a deadly song. The battle lines met with the force of a collapsing mountain. The battle raged across the open plains, a swirling maelstrom of violence and despair. Men fought with the strength of 10, fueled by desperation and the will to survive. Every inch of ground was contested, every victory hard won. A young knight, his face still smooth, cut down a towering raider twice his size. A seasoned warrior, his body a tapestry of scars, fell beneath the onslaught of 3 enemies, his last breath a defiant roar. This was a dance of death, and no one was immune to its macabre rhythm. In the heart of the maelstrom, 2 figures clashed, their duel a spectacle of skill and brutality. The royal king, clad in gleaming plate armor, moved with the grace of a seasoned warrior. His every blow was measured, every parry precise. Facing him, the raider chieftain was a whirlwind of raw power. His great axe cleaved the air, a storm of steel and fury. He fought like a demon possessed, fueled by a lifetime of hardship and a thirst for vengeance. The clash of their weapons echoed across the battlefield, a deadly symphony that held all others spellbound.
The midday sun beat down on the crimson river. It ran red with the blood of fallen soldiers. King Alaric's army pushed forward, desperate to cross. Arrows rained down from the opposite bank. The northerners pressed on, their shields a wall against the deadly hail. Men screamed and fell. The water ran redder still. They had to reach the other side. Their survival depended on it. The southern defenders held their ground. They fought with the fury of cornered wolves. Each man knew the fate of their kingdom rested on their shoulders. General Marcus, a giant of a man, rallied his troops. His voice boomed across the battlefield. He would hold the line. He would not yield. King Alaric, his armor dented and bloodied, reached the opposite bank. He raised his sword, a beacon of defiance. His men surged forward, inspired by their king's courage. The southern line wavered. They had fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. The northerners poured across the river, a tide of steel and fury. The first battle for the Crimson Border had begun. The whispering woods were cloaked in an eerie silence. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. King Alaric's army marched through cautiously. They knew the enemy lurked in the shadows. The silence was a weapon, a tool to instill fear. A twig snapped, then another. The northerners froze, their eyes darting nervously. A volley of arrows suddenly erupted from the trees. Men screamed as they were cut down. Panic rippled through the ranks. They were surrounded. The southern archers, masters of their craft, picked off the northerners one by one. They were ghosts in the woods, their movements swift and silent. King Alaric rallied his men. They formed a shield wall, desperately trying to find some semblance of order. But the arrows kept coming, each one finding its mark. The northerners were being bled dry. They had walked into a trap. Their advance had been too hasty, their confidence misplaced. As darkness fell, the cries of the dying echoed through the whispering woods. The South had won the day, but the war was far from over. Eagle's Nest, perched atop a craggy peak, seemed impregnable. Its walls, built from black stone, had withstood countless sieges. But now, King Alaric and his northerners had come to test their strength once more. Trebuchets hurled stones against the fortress, each impact sending tremors through the ground. The siege had begun. Weeks turned into months. The northerners dug in, their camps encircling Eagle's Nest like a hungry wolf. The defenders grew gaunt and weary. Their supplies dwindled with each passing day. Hope began to flicker. Then General Marcus emerged from the gates of Eagle's Nest. He challenged King Alaric to single combat. The fate of the fortress, of the entire kingdom, would hinge on this duel. The two kings circled each other. Their swords clashed under the watchful gaze of their armies. The duel was a brutal dance of steel and fury. After what seemed like an eternity, King Alaric's blade found its mark. General Marcus fell, mortally wounded. A roar erupted from the northerners. Eagle's Nest, demoralized and leaderless, soon surrendered. The war had taken a decisive turn. The sun beat down on the plains of Vallon, turning the golden wheat blood red. The two armies clashed in a maelstrom of steel and fury. The northerners, their morale soaring after their victory at Eagle's Nest, charged with reckless abandon. The southern lines, weakened and demoralized, struggled to hold. The thunder of hooves filled the air as the northern cavalry smashed into the southern flanks. Men were trampled beneath the hooves of charging steeds. Spears shattered. Swords sang their deadly song. The southern infantry fought with the courage of desperation, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Their lines buckled and broke. The northerners pressed their advantage, their cries of victory echoing across the battlefield. The plains of Vallon had become a slaughterhouse. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the blood-soaked field, the southern army was in full retreat. King Alaric, his armor stained crimson, surveyed the scene with a heavy heart. Victory had come at a terrible cost, and he knew with a growing sense of dread that the war was far from over.
The war had ended 5 years past, yet the land still bore its scars. Villages lay in ruin, their bones picked clean by crows. Fields, once fertile, now sprouted weeds and the ghosts of battles fought. A generation of youth lay buried beneath hastily dug mounds. They were the lucky ones. The survivors were left to grapple with memories best forgotten.
King Alaric sat upon his iron throne. It was a monument to victory, forged from the swords of his enemies. But the weight of the crown upon his brow felt heavier than ever. The war had broken something within him, leaving a hollowness that gnawed at his soul. Sleep offered no escape, only nightmares of clashing steel and the screams of the dying. Peace had come at a terrible cost. I had sacrificed more than just men on the battlefield. I had sacrificed my innocence, my humanity. The man who now ruled the kingdom was a shadow of the king I once aspired to be. I trusted no one, least of all those who claimed to love me. For whispers of rebellion now snaked through the kingdom like a venomous serpent. They slithered through taverns and marketplaces, hidden in hushed tones and furtive glances. The common folk, weary of war and burdened by taxes, muttered of a better life, a life free from the yoke of the Iron Throne.
The whispers spoke of a sigil, a crimson dragon wreathed in flames against a field of black. It was a symbol not seen for generations, a relic of a past thought buried. The Dragon of Ash, they called him. Once, he had been a hero, a warrior who had united the land against a common foe. Now his name was uttered in hushed tones, a harbinger of chaos and destruction. Alaric knew the truth of these whispers. He had seen the sigil himself, scrawled on the bottom of a tax collector's report. It had sent a chill down his spine, awakening a fear he had thought long extinguished. The Dragon of Ash was not just a legend. He was real, and he was back. The king summoned his council, a collection of sycophants and self-serving nobles. They assured him it was nothing, the idle scribblings of a malcontent. But Alaric saw the fear in their eyes, felt the tremor in their voices. They knew, as he did, that the Dragon of Ash was not to be trifled with. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of charisma and rage. Where he tread, armies followed. And now he had set his sights on the Iron Throne. The kingdom, still reeling from the last war, was ill-prepared for another. But the Dragon of Ash cared little for such things. He was a storm about to break, and the kingdom would be swept away by his fury. The Dragon of Ash, whose true name was Caelan, was not a man of noble birth. He was born in the ashes of war, a bastard son of a village ravaged by the king's men. He had clawed his way up from the gutter, his spirit hardened by hardship and fueled by a burning desire for vengeance. His army was a motley crew, drawn from the fringes of society. Dispossessed knights, landless sons, escaped slaves, and mercenaries seeking their fortune flocked to his banner. They were united by their hatred of the crown and the promise of plunder.
Caelan possessed a raw, animalistic charisma that drew men to him. He spoke of a better world, a world without kings or lords, where every man was free to carve out his own destiny. It was a seductive message, one that resonated with the downtrodden and the desperate. His words spread like wildfire, igniting the flames of rebellion in the hearts of the oppressed. The king's spies brought word of Caelan's growing strength. His army swelled with each passing day. It wouldn't be long before he marched on the capital.
Alaric, consumed by paranoia and fear, retreated further into the depths of his palace, his grip on reality slipping with each passing hour. He surrounded himself with guards, yet he trusted none of them. He saw enemies everywhere, lurking in the shadows, whispering behind his back. The court, once a place of grandeur and intrigue, was now a den of vipers. The nobles, sensing weakness in their king, jockeyed for power and influence. They whispered in dark corners, forging alliances and plotting betrayals. Their loyalty, always fickle, had evaporated like dew in the morning sun. Lady Alara, the king's mistress, was the most cunning of them all. Beautiful and ambitious, she had wrapped Alaric around her little finger. She fed his paranoia, whispering poison into his ear, turning him against his most trusted advisors. Her eyes, however, held a cold, calculating light. She was playing a dangerous game, one with the highest of stakes. The king's hand, Lord Valerian, was a man of honor in a den of thieves. He had served Alaric faithfully for decades, but even his loyalty had its limits. He watched with growing despair as the kingdom crumbled around them. He knew that Alaric was no longer fit to rule, yet what choice did he have? To oppose the king was to invite certain death. Valerian had always believed that duty and honor were two sides of the same coin. But now, as the kingdom teetered on the brink of ruin, he began to question everything he had ever held dear. Was it truly honorable to stand by a king who had lost his way, who was leading his people to their doom? Or was it time for him to forge a new path, one that might lead them out of the darkness?